Look, it's the setup. It's amazing.
Ready to go?
I guess so. When do we actually go?
10:30 is start time, probably 10-15 minutes from now we'll go up to the theater room.
Highly focused on impromptu.
Right, informal conversation. It's meant to be authentic, not scripted.
Don't you think we ought to restrict it as very suggested yesterday to our term and not try and get in all that history and all the substance stuff? That's what we know about firsthand.
Well, here's what I think we'll do at the start, and we'll go into momentum. Greg Peterson will start. He'll introduce the Jackson Center, introduce me. I will then introduce each of you briefly, and then ask each of you to introduce your justice. In your case, your first justice. Because we'll get to Warren as the stories go forward. But basically, if you can do, we'll probably do it, Vincent, Frankfurter, Reed, Jackson. Just a few sentences? Just a few sentences of who this person was as of the summer of '53, as you were arriving to work for him.
And then you want to what then get into?
And then, the way I did this in my outline, I will go to one of you with the question, and then each of you progressing about jumping in, volunteering. You can ask each other. And we'll just stay flexible to the extent something gets picked up. That's great.
This is Thurgood Marshall's thought, right? So it's going saying in 5 years we'll have full school integration and that'll be the end of this problem. He was just putting that
Justice Jackson was one of the 9 justices serving on the court during the Supreme Court terms 1952 and 1953 as it considered the cases and rendered the decision that we commemorate this spring on the occasion of its 50th anniversary, Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. The Brown case actually consisted of 5 cases, 4 cases arising from states and 1 case arising from the District of Columbia, which of course is a federal property and not fully a state. The 4 states involved were Kansas, which had the lead billing and thus gives us Brown versus Board of Education from Topeka as the title we used. The other states were Maryland, South Carolina, and Delaware. Pollock today lives in Sarasota, Florida, and we're pleased to welcome him to the Jackson Center. The next clerk to Mr. Pollock's left is Mr. Frank Sander. Frank Sander was an immigrant to the United States, born in Germany, educated in Boston, Public High School in Brookline, Harvard College, and Harvard Law School. Thereafter, he clerked for an appellate judge and then for Justice Frankfurter at the Supreme Court. Following his clerkship with Justice Frankfurter, Mr. Sander also practiced law in the Department of Justice and then in the private sector, and then took the turn into academia. He joined the faculty at Harvard Law School in 1959. He is today the Bussey Professor of Law at Harvard Law School and the director of the Harvard Law School Program on Dispute Resolution. It's a pleasure to welcome Frank Sander to the Jackson. The third law clerk, sitting directly across to me, to Earl Pollock's right, is John David Fassett. John Fassett is a graduate of the University of Rochester, and following military service twice in World War II and in Korea, he is a graduate of the Yale Law School. Following his legal education, he became a law clerk to Supreme Court Justice Stanley Reed for the start of the 1954 term, which was when Justice Jackson died suddenly of a heart attack. Following Justice Jackson's death, Mr. Prettyman was briefly a transitional law clerk for Justice Frankfurter, and following the confirmation of Justice Jackson's successor, John Marshall Harlan, he was a law clerk to Justice Harlan. So he was at the court for 2 years with a total of 3 justices. Following his clerkships, Mr. Prettyman joined the law firm of Hogan and Hartson in Washington, D.C. He left Hogan and Hartson for a time during the Kennedy administration served in the Department of Justice, returned to Hogan, and at various later points in a distinguished career has also left again to do public service in the District of Columbia government. He is today senior counsel at Hogan and Hartson. He's a vice president of the Supreme Court Historical Society. He's been here previously for one of our roundtable discussions with Justice Jackson's law clerks from the 1950s. And it's a pleasure to welcome Barrett Freeman back to the Jackson Center. These gentlemen are both pro, but they are here as representatives, they are here as proxies for the justices who were their employers. As each of them left law school, they got one of the most coveted opportunities for a young lawyer entering the workforce, a clerkship with a Supreme Court justice. And I'd like to begin by asking each of them simply to introduce the boss and describe what that meant and who they were arriving to work for as they arrived at the Supreme Court in the summer of 1953. So Earl Pollack, tell us about Chief Justice Fred Vinson.
I arrived at the Supreme Court in June 1953 to become Vinson's law clerk.
Like Earl, I'm not quite sure about this, but whether I had any conversations with one of our predecessors, Alex Bickle. His is an important name in the Brown history because one of the unusual things about Frankfurter is that he didn't use his clerks for routine work like in certiorari petitions, whether the Supreme Court wanted to take a case. He handled those himself, and he would assign major tasks to people that really required full concentration for an extended period. And related to the question for the rehearing, he had asked his prior clerk, Alex Bickle, to make an investigation of the legislative history of the 14th Amendment to see what light he shed on desegregation. In the end, it turned out not much, but being the professor and scholar, he wanted to leave no stone unturned. So this was in process, and I don't know whether I talked with Alex Bickle about this, but we were certainly very aware of that event.
Reaching the right decision. I think that sounds like, and he said to me, are you one of those people that believes in critocracy? What does that mean? And he referred me to a book or paper that he had there and showed me that critocracy means government by judges. And it was the beginning of a very long dialogue we had over a period of several months. We had a very interesting time as he thought over the process of whether he was going to dissent or not. And critocracy was foremost in his mind. He didn't quite think that this was a role that the judges ought to play.
Barrett, as you were arriving and replacing two clerks all by your lonesome, did you get any transition briefing or any sense of where segregation stood with the court?
I don't recall any discussions with Bill Rehnquist or Don Conson about the segregation cases, and I was not aware of their now famous memos that they wrote. The only discussions I had with the justice gave me the impression that the court was somewhat actually lay because at their one conference they had decided not to take a vote. Unbeknownst to me, not that long thereafter, in fact, the day before the second argument in Brown, he began writing a concurring opinion because he assumed that regardless of how the vote went, the justices either would all be writing, or many of them would, there would be dissents and concurrences and so forth. And so he was trying to get his thoughts down on paper. I didn't see that draft of a concurring opinion until 4 drafts later when he finally gave it.
We will catch up to that point of the story. The decision to request additional briefing.
Each of the things I've interviewed it on occasion for things, and I went back in and talked to him about it. And his reaction was sort of ambivalent, sort of thing. I'm sure
What was the main pitch of the dissent?
The main pitch was that the equal protection clause issue had been settled. History is settled, and Plessy and history of the 14th Amendment. So the only question open was whether, under the due process clause, it should be overruled. And he went on a great length, but never came to a conclusion. And it was yellow pages. I'm convinced he's written it the former summer, or he's been off at Oyster Bay, and was thinking about it. And then he was just sort of teasing me at that stage. But I took it back, and I kept this whole file, and these footnotes and what I had. And so,
At the time that you went back to him, is it your view that he had changed his mind?
it's my view that he had already told the Chief Justice that he would join an opinion if it was an opinion that he could accept. And I think that's sort of confirmed by Frankfurter's letter to of May 19th, right after it came down. Frankfurter congratulated him on having joined it, and
I thought that was pretty late.
I don't think Reed made that clear to the Chief Justice until almost the end of April, because
Tell us why, because unanimity is part of the accomplishment here. So it's important to try and date it as best we can.
what happened was that in the week of April 26th,
conference, and we know that the Chief Justice would not combat somebody's law clerk, even somebody working on it at that stage. So there have been some myths, and some, once they get issued, they get propagated.
The decision, of course, unanimously held that separate but equal has no place in education, and then deferred the question of how segregation was to be remedied. Were there misgivings among your bosses or among you as clerks about this approach to the remedy question?
Well, I think in our chamber, we then had some discussion about this whole question about deferring the enforcement, and Frankfurter, I think, was one of the leaders for that move. So we didn't make this decision despite some of the involvement of some of the law clerks. I think
We had no
it
vote.
was our justices who made these decisions.
But if
Sometimes.
you're asking us what difficulty we personally had in reaching whatever decision we did, I don't have any problem answering that at all. I just never had any difficulty at all. I mean, I thought the time had long since come. It was overdue. And the only thing that really bothered me was if we were going to have a fractured court where we had all these 9 opinions all over the lot and everything. That bothered me. But in terms of the essence, the real issue, I didn't have any difficulty. I had a lot of difficulty with figuring out how it was going to work, because one of the things I did on a special committee, which we didn't get into, was I got hold of various maps of cities to show where blacks and whites actually lived and what schools they went to and how were they assigned. And I found out it was really complicated, that it wasn't the same system throughout the country at all. It wasn't just you went to the school near at your home. There were all kinds of methods of putting kids in school, and I just didn't see how we were going to come up with any kind of decree that was going to make sense over the whole country. So, but see, that was in terms of implementation, not in terms of how I personally felt about the issue.
I like Barrett, and I think like almost all the law clerks, there was virtual unanimity among them that the proper decision was to overrule Plessy versus Ferguson. A very small minority that felt otherwise about it. But my problem was working for a justice who I respected a great deal, who was a great gentleman, who worried a lot about this.
like Barrett, I had my concerns about implementation, how it could be done in order to avoid violence, in order to make the process as expeditious as possible. But personal question as to how the matter should be decided, possibly in part because I attended a grade school that was 50.
Discussion, I didn't know there was 5 cases involved, and I wondered why it was that the Brown family got the most publicity and why they don't call it by the other names.
That's interesting because Kansas would be the last state you would think of about the farm. I mean, Virginia and the South Carolina cases were the really contentious ones. Just hoping to, you wrote a book, The Time to Lose. They weren't even going to appear and support Plessy versus Ferguson.
They were already capitulating.
Yeah, as in Delaware.
I
So,
think
but
the answer is it's a mundane reason of the alphabet.
it was the first case filed.
Yeah.
And it was the docket that did it. But it turned out interesting.
Well, it is one of those cases, I think one of you, Jack, you may have written this, that the name turns out to be one of those lovely coincidental articulations of the issue.
It's
Brown is in skin color versus a Board of Education,
Yeah,
like Loving
it's
versus
sort of like
Virginia.
this new book that's coming out next week, Black, White, and Brown. It works so well into the whole subject matter.
I have a question to ask John. Is there going to be a 100th anniversary of Brown, at which we won't be there, but you think they're...
Yeah.
These young people will be there.
Right.
I already have it on my calendar.
Yeah. I have no doubt, but first plan for the 60th.